Hello and welcome back for the review of Black Myth Wukong. Um, I had a blast playing this game. I wrote some stuff down to make sure I don't forget anything or leave anything out that I wanted to address. Some of it I probably talked about a lot through the videos already, but there's some stuff I do just want to mention that I either didn't talk about or some thoughts that I might have said one way but meant something else. So that's what this is for. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm hoping it's going to be like 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops, but we'll see. So first off, the sound, music, and art direction, 5 out of 5. Like game developers in that facet of the game, that was incredible. I loved everything about it. The only real problems that I had in terms of sound was some of the music was forgettable for like the basic bosses or the mini bosses. I'm sure it was the same track for almost all of them, but I would have loved a little bit more variety and like a little bit more oomph behind some of them, just so I could enjoy the music a little bit more because it felt like I was listening to the same thing all the time. But I rate pretty much everything out of 5, and in that area, 5 out of 5, perfect score. It was amazing. Like there's so much greatness that I can't overlook that tiny thing. In terms of like visual design, same thing. It was phenomenal. I loved how everything looked. I loved the art direction of the game. The music videos in between each chapters were outstanding. I loved every second of it. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. The next one that I want to talk about is level design. This was pretty average, I thought. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and the reason being is there's just some too simple things that they did, or some things that I personally didn't like because it was just a little annoying, inconvenient, irritating. It all depends on how your viewpoint is. But my first issue that I had was there's not a lot of interconnection between different parts of the levels. Like, I don't know if they were trying to go for a full open world experience within the level itself, or if they wanted a linear experience, or they're trying to do like some of the other From Software versions or other Souls-like games where it's like a half open world, where essentially you have a place you can warp from and you can do everything you want within those areas. But I thought the level design itself, there was no interconnection within the chapter. It was very, very rare. Like, I honestly don't remember any other than what was in chapter 5, where I'm exploring the side area or the main area. We drop down with the ping ping, then we come back way later in the level after the fire has been blown out with the fan, and now I can go that area to unlock a secret area. Right? Like, I didn't know that was there my first playthrough, and the second playthrough I found it, but I was also like, this is where it interconnects? That's so weird. Why is it interconnecting this way where I don't think I would come back? Like, the interconnection was there, but it wasn't like readily available, and it didn't really make sense. I really thought that it was mainly just long hallways with tiny side paths and a lot of basic enemies, which I'm going to talk about the basic enemies in a little bit. But that was the main gripes. The other main gripe, which I know I vented on several times, was invisible walls. And I know I feel like I'm ragging on level design, but they did like a pretty good job. It's just these are the main things that I noticed that took it out of that 5-star range. Because graphics-wise, sound-wise, phenomenal. Just the level design, I feel, could be adding a few things or fixing a few things to make it better for their next game that they make. If they make another one that's AAA quality, which I hope they do. It's freaking awesome. I also felt that some secret areas felt like they were just thrown in either at the last second, or they're like, okay, we got these extra levels, we don't really know what to do with them. Let's just put them behind a boss or put them behind this item or something like that. It felt, if some of them felt a little off, like a little weird. For example, one that they did really, really well was that Venom boss. Once you beat him that second time, he unlocks the path where the Demon Lord and Duskvale are. That was really well done. But like the secret area in chapter 1, I didn't really like because I was just getting those because I noticed that there was an item or like a option to do something at the bells, and that was really it. I had no idea that it was going to unlock a secret area, so it was like one of those things where it's like, oh, instead of kept wandering upon it on your own, you're just going to do these 4 bells because we're going to make sure you very clearly can see them, and then poof, you go to a secret area. So it was kind of weird. That was the main one that I thought that was a little off-putting in terms of what, like disrupting the flow of the level. But other than that, most of them are pretty good. And my number one complaint with this whole game is basic enemies were too damn basic for most of the game. Like, Chapter 1, I get it, you gotta ease them into it. You can't have too many hard enemies because then people aren't gonna want to play your game for very long. But after Chapter 2, they maybe have anywhere from 4 to 5 hours of gameplay already. They probably have a boatload of skills unlocked. They probably have some magic unlocked. And you just keep throwing sponges at them. To me, on the second playthrough, and technically a third playthrough, because I did play through chapters 1, 2, and most of 3, and then I lost footage and had to start over again. To me, it was one of those things where I just said screw it and ran right past them because I didn't care about fighting them. And to me, I don't want to do that until I have hundreds of hours in the game and I have mastered everything this combat has to have or has to offer. And I didn't like that. I wish there were more enemies like in Chapter 5, even Chapter 4, where there's enemies that attack back. There's enemies that counter your moves. That would have been really, really cool to see in this game. But again, level design, I give it a 3 out of 5. Like, it's not bad. It's pretty average. This is a typical game that I've played. This is a typical design or level design for games that I have played. But keeping on with the enemy design, we're looking at boss designs. Bosses, with how many they have, that's pretty much the only real reason why I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. I thought all of the main bosses that you would come across on your first playthrough with not doing a ton of exploring were incredible. But the downside to that is there's so many in this game, there's like 80 something, not all of them are going to be winners. And that's kind of the drawback that I put with that. Like, I'd probably have the same score with Elden Ring. Elden Ring has over 200 bosses. It's a phenomenal game, but not every boss is winners. And I'm mainly talking about side bosses or minor bosses. I thought, like, out of all of them, I'd say maybe 10% were rough, meaning they just didn't flow very good with the combat that they tried to choose, or they're just very forgettable, meaning it was just a punching bag with a boss bar. But again, we're talking about out of like 80 bosses, we'll say 10%, that's 8. 8 bosses weren't very good. So 4 out of 5 is definitely the best score I can give it. I can't give it 5 out of 5 because there were several moments where I'm just like, whew, this boss is rough. Or, you know, I'm completely forgetting about you. But again, overall, very, very good. A few other things that I wish they would done that even with the negative stuff that I just talked about, if they would have added this in or like a sequel playthrough, they look at this from like a gameplay perspective, how can they improve their bosses? What I would love to see is more of those main bosses having the ability like what Erlang did or Wukong at the end, where they have a way to counter your magic or counter your skills. That forces you as the player to even level up your own playstyle in the middle of a boss fight. And it's really, really, really important that stuff like that's in there, because if there were more bosses that were doing that in Chapter 3, in Chapter 4, I'd probably want to come back and do this again so I can sharpen up my skills. But there's really only like 2 bosses, 3 bosses that have that level of difficulty in them. Like, there were some bosses that I was really stuck on for a while in this game, but none of them really did that, with the exception of Erlang, Wukong, Yin Tiger did it a little bit. I can't think of anybody else. So that's my main gripe, is if you're gonna have bosses that are difficult, great, but in order to get that difficulty a little bit easier, like another step up, I would add in more bosses that have that ability, like Erlang's Deflection or Wukong's Freeze or anything like that. That's just something to make the fights not necessarily more engaging, because you're already engaged in them, but some of those simpler bosses that I'm complaining about could have gotten a little bit more memorable, could have been a little bit less rough because they are forcing you to level up your playstyle. And I don't mean like actually putting skills. I mean legitimately changing the buttons you are pressing to make the game harder. Or, in my opinion, more enjoyable. I also thought some fights were just a little too long. The Erlang fight was awesome. I had never experienced that before. But I looked at my timer in between episodes. each fight that I would fight and lose on was like 10 minutes. Dude, if you're trying to get people to play your game and you have a boss fight that is 10 minutes long, oh my god. Like, you are asking a ton of commitment from a lot of people who may never get to that boss again. So for me, some fights that were really stinking cool were just a little too long. And especially if you're like me who loves to grind fights and battle them out all in a row, you don't really want fights that feel like I'm going 80% of its health bar, I got it down to the last 20%, and then I die, and I look over and I'm like, that was 15 minutes. Yeah, I don't really like that. I don't like it. It doesn't mean I think that the boss is bad or anything. I just think that there's so much I want to do in a day, and I'm not talking just for videos, but like in an actual day. And if I keep taking 10 minutes to fight a boss and lose, that's a problem. So I think a way to fix it would either be not make the bosses as spongy, or how else can I put it? Or how make it so you actually lose faster. And that sounds counterproductive because people don't like losing. But seriously, if I was fighting Erlang and he hits me 5 times, I should be dead by hit 3. I shouldn't be dead by hit 5. That way, it seems like every time you fail, you are forced to get better by the game. Otherwise, you're just going to keep practicing the one part of the fight that you struggle with, and then you get better at. So that's my opinion on boss design. Again, 4 out of 5. So far, we've got 5 out of 5 on sound and music. Level design has 3 out of 5, and boss design is 4 out of 5. Not bad overall, but the main thing that drew me to this game was the combat. The combat, I will give it a 4 out of 5. There are a few things that I can't overlook. I thought, as a whole, 4 out of 5 is really good. It's just there's things that I thought were either too simple, too easy, too repetitive, and that's kind of the things that made me drop it down from a 5 out of 5 to a 4 out of 5. Like, for example, each stance should be different. Like, with thrust stance, smash stance, and pillar stance, all of the main attacks, the normal attacks, the light attacks, were the same in any stance. Like, my first playthrough, I legitimately hit the D-pad 1 or 2 times to switch stances. I had no idea I was in another stance until I did the heavy stance, because they're the exact same moves. Which is kind of my problem, that's what I'm saying. If you're going to be thrust stance, then maybe in your normal attacks, you got some thrust attacks instead of just using it for your heavy attacks. And same thing for pillar. Like, maybe have him jump off and slam down his staff from pillar stance for like a heavy attack finisher or a light attack finisher. Instead of just doing the same thing for smash stance as you would for all of the other ones. And like, I get it. They did so much in terms of graphic design, in terms of movements for all the bosses and enemies. It's very difficult to do that for your own character too, on top of it, but I feel like that would have pushed it over the edge to where this would be something that is on par in terms of build variety, in terms of combat styles, as like a Nioh 2 or a Souls-like game or a Souls game. Next is with the stances as well. I would have loved more interconnectivity between the stances. That would have encouraged me more instead of just maxing out one stance and being like, okay, I like this stance, I don't really care for the other ones, now I can go do other stats. This would have encouraged you to dial it up more in your own playstyle, and again, like I said, with leveling up to fight certain bosses, now you're leveling up how you play the game because you're using different skills or different stance attacks that would go from thrust stance to pillar stance, then pillar stance to smash stance. That would have been so cool to see. I don't know how they would have been able to do it. I thought the combat system they chose was really, really good, just too simple for someone like me because I felt like I was just hitting square for 10 minutes straight in the Erlang fight, and then occasionally I would hit a triangle or two to try to get him to stagger. But it's like I'm mashing square and barely doing anything else. And that includes with all of the skills that I unlocked to get my stance maxed out. And then the other thing that really bothered me, and this is more of a nitpicky thing for me in terms of buttons on the controller, why did you put heal at L1? I don't like that. Every game that I've ever played in terms of healing, it's always either triangle or on the D-pad because it's something that's very easy to grab or very easy to get. L1 is a weird button because it's on a bumper for your controller. I've used an Xbox controller. I've used a PlayStation controller. I played this game on PlayStation. My controller works great with every other game, but for some reason I hit L1 in this game and it doesn't work consistently. It's one of those very, very, very minor things that upsets me. Because I know the game developers probably had that as like their only option. Well, we got to put something on L1. Let's just make it the heel. But man, you could have done something else. You could have been like L1 opens the wheel to do your items or something like that. Or L1 opens the button to switch your stances and then you use the D-pad for it. But that would have just been me. That's how I would have done it. But I know I'm not a game developer. I don't know how any of that stuff works. But for your final score, if you have been paying attention and doing some math, again, I'll share the scores for the other ones. We got sound, music, and art direction, 5 out of 5, perfect score. Level design was 3 out of 5, boss design was 4 out of 5, and combat system was 4 out of 5. So if you add all that up, that is an 80% out of 100%, or a 16 out of 20. You do the math, 80% is good enough for 4 out of 5 stars. Again, exceptional game. The only category I didn't put on this list was story, and that was because the story, for me, I'm in the middle on. I can't really give it a score because, for me, I don't know enough about this type of story, the mythology, or anything like that, to give it an accurate score. Even on 2 playthroughs, I still don't really know what's going on. So in my eyes, I could give it a 0, but I also think the story's pretty good, so I could give it like a 4 or a 5. So story, I am not grading, just simply because I don't know enough about Wukong. I don't know about the mythology of Wukong, or Journey to the West, because I haven't read the book. But that is my review of the game. I think it's phenomenal. It is a shame that it didn't win Game of the Year, but it is definitely my game of the year for 2024. It is an absolutely exceptional game. If you have not played it, even if you did watch my playthrough and you already know what's going to happen, experience the game yourself, because man, this game brought me so many smiles playing it my first time and my second time through. But if you liked my review, if you liked watching me play it, please be sure to subscribe as well. We got more games on the way, some Souls-likes coming at you, some From Software games coming at you as well over the next few weeks. But while we are waiting for Monster Hunter Wilds to come out. When that game comes out, I am going to give it the same treatment as Wukong and devote a lot of time to playing it, because that game was super fun when I played the beta. Speaking of that, I do have the beta up on my YouTube as well, so if you are done with this one, you should hop on over and watch that, because I got some pretty cool fights in there from hunting some big-ass monsters. But anyway, guys, I've been rambling for like 18 minutes, my goodness. I'll shut up. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.